Welcome, and greetings to all. I am Shen Longpen Dragon, the Lore Master. So, as always, a quick disclaimer here. I do not own any of the images or the story in this video. The credit for these all belong to their original sources. So, ladies and gentlemen, today's story is going to be a rather special one. I'm going to be talking about the story of the Stone of Destiny, also known as the Coronation Stone, the Stone of Scone. Sometimes I've heard it referred to as the Stone of Scotland and various other names. But yeah, hopefully you will enjoy this story. I know a couple of people mentioned it back when I did the Scotia video, and you'll see why in a few minutes. So, ladies and gentlemen, what exactly is this stone? Well, the very short answer is it's a rock. To give you a bit more of a detailed explanation, and I'm probably going to go full geology nerd here, do apologise. It's a rectangular piece of sandstone, which you can see from the photo. It's got various cuts, nicks, marks, weathering on it and such. Attached to the top of it are two iron rings and two hooks, which most likely were installed for ease of transport and carrying. The surface from this photo is pretty badly weathered, so I can't give too much of a detailed scientific analysis on it without actually seeing the rock itself, and unfortunately most of the images of the stone that you'll see in this video are replicas, they're not the real thing. This particular image I think is a replica rather than the actual stone itself. So, ladies and gentlemen, lots of people have speculated over the years as to exactly where this stone came from. Some people claim it's originally from Scotland, others say it was imported from elsewhere, and we'll get into those stories soon enough. So, you still with me? Well, I do hope so. Let's keep going and continue and find out more about the Stone of Destiny. So, ladies and gentlemen, the image that you can see in the background here is an artist's rendition of the biblical character Jacob. Now, he's important to the Stone of Destiny because a lot of people actually claim the stone is in fact the Stone of Jacob, or also known as the Pillow of Jacob. Now, I'm not too massively familiar with the story of Jacob itself. If anyone would like to catch me up in the comments section down below, then please do. But from what I understand, it's a supposed stone that he laid his head on and slept on as a pillow and then carried with him, I believe, to a specific location. More than that, I don't really know much about Jacob and the biblical side of that story, I'm afraid. So again, if somebody knows more about it, then please do catch me up there. So the second origin story of the Stone of Destiny is again biblical. The legend goes that it was once the plinth of which the Ark of the Covenant sat upon. We can all remember the Ark of the Covenant, I'm pretty sure, from various stories and legends, and in particular the Indiana Jones movie, Raiders of the Lost Ark, which, believe it or not, I haven't actually seen all of. I've only seen clips of it. Yes, I know, tragic, or some people may say, or maybe lucky, I don't know. It depends on whether or not you like the movie. And either way, I can't judge it because I've not seen it. But moving swiftly on. So we see here an artist's depiction of the Ark being, I guess, worshipped by these two gentlemen. And if you were to believe the story, the stone would be underneath the Ark, and under that cloth which seems to be covering it. Whether or not you believe this story is entirely down to you. I personally have no idea, but find it relatively unlikely that the stone probably was related to these biblical stories at all, but again, that's just my opinion. I could very well be wrong, and who knows. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you were to believe the biblical stories, or the biblical origins of the Stone of Destiny, then you would probably have worked out that the stone originates in Syria. Now the legend goes that if you believe one or both of the biblical stories, is that the husband of Princess Scotia of Egypt, King, and I do hope I pronounce his name right here, Galathus, brought the stone from Syria to Egypt. Now, if I'm getting my sources right, I believe that King Galathus was Greek rather than Middle Eastern, but either way, that's not exactly massively important. Again, if I'm pronouncing that wrong, someone please do correct me. So, eventually, Galathus, fighting on behalf of the Egyptians, found that they were engaged in a losing battle, and the Egyptian army was in fact defeated. So his first thoughts were, right, I need to get my family out of here to safety. So he packed up his wife, children, and for whatever reason grabbed this stone, and they set sail. And if you remember from our Scotia video, which I did a while ago, they eventually ended up in Ireland. So, what exactly happened to the stone after it got to Ireland? Well, that's what we're going to look at next. So the area of Scotland that you see highlighted here is the modern day area known as Argyll. Now, back during the time of King Galathus, this area was more commonly known as, and I do hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, it's kind of embarrassing if I get it wrong, is known as Dalriada. Now, the Dalriada kingdom, if you were, became eventually the foreground of these new Irish settlers. After all, they decided to, for some reason, settle in Scotland, and as you probably remember from the Scotia video, they were eventually beaten back by the native Pictish tribes and other Scottish clans and tribes that lived in the area. After arriving in Ireland to begin with, King Galathus was supposedly crowned as the King of Ireland, again if you believe the stories. And again, I didn't mention this in Scotia's video because, well, Scotia was the origin of Scotland's supposed name, so I didn't really want Galathus to overshadow her, and there's not really much known about him to begin with in the first place anyway. And again, the reason why I didn't mention any of this really in the Scotia video in relevance to the Stone of Destiny is because I thought the stone deserved its own video rather than being a footnote in Scotia's story. So moving swiftly on anyway. So what happened exactly with the stone? So years later, after being beaten back, Scotia supposedly raised a new army and invaded Argyll properly rather than just as settlers. And after, well, I'm gonna guess several skirmishes, they were eventually able to establish themselves in what is now referred to as Argyll. Eventually, the descendants of King Galathus, who were the supposed kings of Ireland, and again, I hope I pronounced this correctly, Dalriada, eventually brought the stone over with them, and I believe the first person to bring it over, I think, was called Fergus in the modern day. Again, I hope I get that right. I could be getting his name completely wrong, but sources say that the modern pronunciation of his name is Fergus, which is actually quite a good common Scottish name. In fact, you actually quite hear it a lot in Ireland too. So, King Fergus, if you will, or King Fergus I, eventually established himself here, and when later on his own descendants united the Pictish and Irish settling kingdoms together, or the Scots, if you will, to form the Scottish, he moved his capital from the Argyll area to Scone, and this is what gives the stone part of its name as the Stone of Scone. So, ladies and gentlemen, I didn't mention the name of the uniting king of the Scots and the Pictish before. I do apologise about that. That was King Kenneth I, the 36th king of the Dalriadian kingdom, or of the Scots, if you will. So after uniting the Pictish and Scottish tribes, as I said a few moments ago, he moved his capital to Scone in Perthshire and established himself as the new King of Scotland, if you will. So, why exactly from this point on did the stone become so important to Scotland and Scottish culture and Scottish people? Well, it became a very, very important symbol of the Scottish kings. So every king after Kenneth, who became the King of Scotland, was crowned with this stone. They would supposedly sit or stand on the stone and the crown would be placed upon their heads. This gives it another name, known as the coronation stone, and again you'll see another reason why the coronation stone becomes particularly relevant in English culture in a few minutes. You may remember a game called Total War Saga, specifically the version which is set in the UK in Britain, which is relevant to the formation of England under King Alfred of Wessex and the invading Viking or Danish army, sometimes known as the Great Heathen Army or the Great Viking Invasion. Now, part of that story, if you play as the Scottish kingdoms, has you traipsing all around the country looking for the Stone of Destiny, which is supposedly lost. I don't know how much poetic license went into that campaign story, to be honest. I'm gonna assume probably quite a fair bit, because I've not heard any real story of the stone being lost in Scotland and a Scottish king actively seeking it out in his campaigns to try and properly establish himself as the true King of Scotland. But again, I could be wrong. It could be that that is indeed what happened. But nonetheless, I'm gonna go off the assumption, and someone please correct me if I'm wrong, that the stone remained in Scone for several centuries, being used as the coronation stone of the Scottish kings. Now, this is not the first time such an event took place in Scotland. Pictish kings were famous for, and I actually don't know where this hill is, but there is a hill in eastern Scotland somewhere, and again, I don't know where. That supposedly has a footprint in it. Now, what the story around this hill is that Scottish kings, or Pictish kings, would place their foot upon this rock, on this hillside, and it would be there that they would be crowned as the new Pictish king. And this supposedly this continued right up until the unification of the Scots and the Picts. In fact, if you were to visit this hillside, you can supposedly still even see the footprint of the where the kings placed their foot upon this rock. Again, if anybody remembers or knows what it is called, then please do put that down in the comments section below. In fact, I might even go have another look for it later after publishing this video, and I'll put down in the comment section where that stone or where that hillside is. Unfortunately, I couldn't find any images of it, so I haven't included it here. So, ladies and gentlemen, the image that you're seeing here is all that remains of the ruins of Scone Abbey, which was the historical home of the stone. You can actually visit the ruins still and see a replica of the stone housed within the ruined buildings itself. This building still standing here. Now, I don't know if this is a reconstruction or a restoration, but whatever the case, it is really the only proper roofed building still standing as part of the Abbey ruins. And again, if you were to ever visit Scotland, or if you indeed live in Scotland and wanted to visit the ruins, you'd actually be able to see the replica housed inside. Now again, I don't know if the stone replica is housed in the ruins, or if it's housed in this building, as I've not actually visited the ruins myself. So, some of you may be wondering, why is the stone used in coronation in such a way that I described earlier? Well, this was a tradition that originally started with King Geological when he supposedly brought the stone to Ireland, or supposedly was crowned in Ireland. The coronation ceremony was supposedly conducted over or on this stone. This tradition continued with his descendants, and eventually when the stone was brought to Scotland, again the tradition still continued. right down through the Scottish kings. So, the image that you see here, ladies and gentlemen, is a very poignant historical character whom we probably all know and arguably hate. This is King Edward I of England, aka Edward Longshanks, and yes, I can already hear about numerous people booing their heads off at this character, and yeah, I can understand why. He wasn't exactly the nicest of people to really anybody. The Scots, the Welsh, his own subjects, and even in particular his own son. Yeah, so a lot of stories say that he wasn't exactly a nice guy at all. Now, a lot of you will probably know this next part. During the so-called Scottish Wars of Independence, as they were known, Longshanks was absolutely determined to subjugate the Scottish kings. Now, as to how the war started, not many of you, well, many of you may in fact know the story. I mean, if you are Scottish, you probably studied this in school. That anybody who doesn't know, I'll go over the story anyway. So, a Scottish king known as Alexander supposedly visited Edinburgh Castle one night or one day, and during the night, after a raucous night of drinking and feasting, visiting his friend, he decided he would return to Scone to continue ruling the country as you do. His friend and the servants at the castle, I can't remember the friend's name, unfortunately, it's a long time since I looked at the story, all told the king, no, stay in Edinburgh, it's too dangerous to travel by night, you'd be much better, especially after you've been drinking, you'd be much safer stay the night and then go in the morning. But being drunk and being a king and believing that nothing would dare attack him, King Alexander decided that he didn't want to stay in Edinburgh, he wanted to return to Scone. So that night he rode away from Edinburgh and up towards Scone. Yes, I know there's a joke here. Don't drink and ride, or don't drink and horse ride, don't drink and drive, and all the rest of it. And seriously, ladies and gentlemen, please, seriously, don't drink and drive and don't drink and horse ride. It's really not a good idea, as this story will tell you. Now, no one really knows exactly what happened to King Alexander, but needless to say, he never arrived home in Scone. Now, obviously, the Scots got rather worried, thinking, oh my god, where's the king? Eventually they found him, and I don't know where this ravine is. It is between Scotland, well, it is in Scotland, obviously, it's between Edinburgh and Scone. But the supposed story is that he fell from this ravine with his horse during the night, unable to see, drunk, and supposedly during bad weather. Unfortunately, both the king and his horse were found dead. Now, I've heard a lot of people speculate as to whether or not he may have been assassinated under the orders of King Edward. Now, I will tell you this, there is absolutely no historical evidence to prove that Alexander was murdered. But again, there's no historical evidence to say that he wasn't. Whether or not you believe he was assassinated or not is down to you, but just as I put it out there, there's no actual proof either way. And as you can imagine, King Edward was accused by several Scots, and yes, he did deny it profusely, and again, they couldn't pursue any case against it because there was no case, there was no evidence. Either way, the death of King Alexander presented Longshanks with exactly the opportunity he needed to try and subjugate the Scots. Rather than declaring open war on them, which would at the time would have been a very silly idea because he was currently engaged in a very expensive war with France at the time, he decided to flex his political muscles and essentially meddled and interfered with the inheritance and selection of the new Scottish king, and essentially established a puppet ruler. Now, King Edward actually visited this new king of Scotland during his coronation. Unfortunately, I can't remember this king's name. He's not particularly important. He's not considered a particularly important character overall in Scottish history. He wasn't exactly a good or wise or strong king. Now, supposedly at the coronation, this Scottish king gave a little nod, a little bow of thanks and approval to King Edward, supposedly 1 for visiting and paying him respect, and 2 for supposedly flexing his political muscles to help him get the role as king. Now, as I'm sure you can imagine, a lot of Scots were at the sight of this, believing, oh my god, we have a puppet king, we're under the rule of the English, no, kind of thing. Not wanting this to be the case and not wanting to be seen as a weakling in the eyes of his subjects, not long into his reign, this new king of Scotland decided to very, very unfoolishly declare war on King Edward and attacked the English. Now, this king was a rather foolish king. He declared war at a very bad time. At the time, the English army was in England. It wasn't currently fighting France at that moment. So King Edward, being a very strong military king, was able to easily overcome and defeat the Scottish army when it attacked. And he then used the opportunity, saying, well, you declared war on me, so I'm going to attack. He then attacked the Scottish border and was able to subjugate a lot of land in Scotland and annexed a lot of land, establishing puppet lords and rulers and whatnot all across the lower lands. In fact, it was really only the Highlands that King Edward at the time didn't get his hands on properly. And this then goes into the story of William Wallace, as I'm sure we all know. I'm not going to go into the story of William Wallace here. I mean, if you want me to do William Wallace's story later, I will happily do that for you. But we shall see. Anyway, moving swiftly on with this, as you can imagine, this was really the true start of the Scottish Wars of Independence. So, ladies and gentlemen, having believed that his dominance and victory over the Scots was secure, Edward came across the Stone of Destiny in Scone. Now, he had seen the stone at the coronation of the now dead King of Scotland, and believed, hey, if I took this stone, I would completely and utterly decimate the fighting spirit of the Scots. There's no way they would rise up against me, and there's no way they'd be able to crown a new king without this. So he took the stone back to London with him and placed it here, or what eventually where this became. Now, this building, I think a lot of you will recognise. This is Westminster Abbey, and it is a very, very famous building in London. This is where the coronation of the kings and queens of England and now of the United Kingdom takes place. This is also where our members of our royal family typically get married. The last time this abbey was used was, if I remember correctly, was the wedding of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. So, moving swiftly on. Westminster Abbey became the new home of the Stone of Destiny, which was later renamed as the Coronation Stone. Now, continuing on the tradition of the crowning over the stone was placed into a chair and it became used to crown the new kings of England. So, ladies and gentlemen, even after the Scottish defeated the English king Edward II, who was the first English king to be crowned using the stone, as you can see here, the stone was set into the throne, the new king or queen would sit on the throne and they would be crowned. This tradition actually does continue even today, and I'll get on to that in a minute. But Edward II was the first king to be crowned, first English king to be crowned using the stone, and he was eventually defeated by the new king, whom a lot of Scots will probably be cheering at this name, King Robert Bruce, also known as Robert the Bruce. He defeated Edward II at the Battle of Bannockburn, and anybody who knows anything about British history will know that Edward II was a complete and utter muppet. He was probably the second worst king England has ever known, and let's be honest, I think a lot of English will probably be able to relate and establish this. England has had its fair share of pretty useless kings, just like every other country in the world. I mean, you could probably point at any European country in the world and they will probably be able to tell you, yeah, we've had some pretty terrible kings. But as sure as you can imagine, Edward II was a bit of an idiot. Probably only second only to Prince John, and then later King John, who again was also a complete and utter idiot. So, moving swiftly on, you may be wondering, well, did the stone ever return to Scotland? And the answer is yes, but not yet. It was returned much, much later. So even after the defeat of Edward II, the Scots didn't get their stone back, which probably a lot of them were very disappointed about. They were probably hoping they would get it returned to them. But no, the stone remained in London at Westminster Abbey for several centuries on. However, that doesn't mean the Scots didn't kind of get their own back in terms of the stone later. When the United Kingdom was formed, the first king of the United Kingdom was not English, he was Scottish. Now, a lot of you will probably remember Queen Mary Scots, or you will have heard the story of Queen Mary Scots. Now, after she was executed by Queen Elizabeth, her cousin, now Queen Elizabeth of England supposedly did not want to execute her cousin. She was adamant against it. She did not want to execute her, but her ministers forced her, well, I say forced her, they kind of persuaded her to go through with it. Now, this was less about annexing Scotland and Scottish independence. This was more about establishing her own rule over the English, primarily due to religious reasons as well as political. Because Mary Queen of Scots was in fact a Catholic, whereas Elizabeth I was Protestant. And if you remember the story of Elizabeth I's father, Henry VIII, religion played a big part of his reign. So, moving swiftly on. After her death, or rather I should say the death of Queen Elizabeth I, everybody was in uproar. There was no legitimate heir to the throne of England. However, as they turned out, there was a legitimate heir. Her only supposed living relative at the time of royal blood was a Scottish king, King James VI of Scotland, the son of Queen Mary. Now, supposedly, James, I won't say forgave Elizabeth. He was I don't know how well they got on. I would assume they didn't get on that great. But either way, Elizabeth seemed to not be against James inheriting the throne after her. She certainly made no moves against him while he was King of Scotland. And so James VI, after Elizabeth's death, then became the new King of England and was recrowned as James I of England. And thus, this was the first king of the United Kingdom. And here we see the rise of the Stuart Kings of the United Kingdom. And this then goes on later into the fall of the Stuarts and the rise of the Jacobite rebellions. Which, again, if you're interested in that, I can go over the Jacobite rebellions at a later date. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, will recognise the image of this lady here. This is Queen Elizabeth II, our current queen. Now, any of you who are British or strong supporters of the royal family will probably be yelling out "God save the Queen" and "Long live the Queen, may she long reign over us" and whatnot, and yeah, in many cases I would probably be saying that along with you. My family is quite strong supporters of our current monarchy. Moving swiftly on, the Queen was actually established in terms of her throne, and her coronation took place in 1953. Now, this was the last time the stone was actually used in the coronation of our monarchs. And it is actually still set to be used for the crowning of our next monarch. Yes, the stone has been guaranteed that it will be used as a continuing symbol of coronation for the foreseeable future. Now, in terms of the Queen herself, I'm going to answer this question here because I've heard a few people ask this before, not on the channel, but just in general. Primarily, friends I have from America have asked me this when I was at uni with them. Now, they asked me, is Queen Elizabeth a Plantagenet queen? I'm going to answer that very, very simply for you here. No. Queen Elizabeth is not a Plantagenet. The the Plantagenets were the Norman English kings. So this was kings such as Edward I, Edward II, the Third, and their forebears and forerunners. So you could argue that the first Plantagenet king of England was the Norman King William the Conqueror. Again, that's subject to academic debate whether or not you believe he was truly a Plantagenet or he was just the first of the line that became the Plantagenets. But either way, to answer the question there, no, our current queen is not a Plantagenet. She is in fact a Windsor. The Windsor dynasty is descended from Queen Victoria, as I'm sure the vast majority of you know. And again, as I'm sure most of you know, the Windsor dynasty is in fact Germanic in origin. That doesn't mean that they are German, it just means that they have German ancestors. And to be honest, this is not uncommon. Most of the monarchies of Europe prior to World War I came from a Germanic origin, or originally had their dynasty origins through Germanic lines, primarily through Queen Victoria. There are in fact still kingdoms within the European that do in fact still have their monarch. Probably the two most well-known ones being the Netherlands and Spain. There are a few others, but they're less well-known, so I won't really go into them here. But either way, as I was saying, the last time the stone was actually used was for the coronation of our current queen, Queen Elizabeth. So, ladies and gentlemen, a lot of you are probably wondering, did the Scots ever get their stone back? And the answer is yes. Here we see a photograph taken in 1996 of the stone finally being returned to Scotland, 700 years after Edward I took it. Now, in terms of the stone being returned, there was a lot of political debate going on about it. There were some people saying, no, it should remain in England because it's been a symbol of the coronation of the kings of the United Kingdom and the kings of England for 700 years. The Scots saying, no, it was ours first, we want it back. That kind of idea. There was backwards and forwards, point scoring. No one was really getting on. In fact, there was actually riots at one point going on about it. Eventually, the Queen got involved and more or less put her foot down saying, no, the stone came from Scotland, it should be returned to Scotland. And so with the Queen's blessing and the government eventually voting for the stone to be given back to the Scots, the stone was in 1996 returned. Now, it was returned on a particular day of importance in the Scottish calendar, if you will. This is to say it was returned on St Andrew's Day. Now, everyone knowing St Andrew is the patron saint of Scotland. So on the 30th November, aka St Andrew's Day, 1996, the stone was given an honour guard and returned to Scotland, specifically Edinburgh Castle. Now, as you can imagine, the streets were lined, full of people all over the place, everybody coming out to welcome the stone back to Scotland after 700 years. However, the deal of the stone being returned to Scotland was, at the coronation of the next monarch, it would temporarily be taken back to London, be used in the coronation service of the next king or queen of the United Kingdom. In this case, it will be a king, and then it would be returned to Scotland afterwards again, to where it should, in many cases, a lot of you will argue, me included, where it should remain, in Scotland. So, ladies and gentlemen, you're probably wondering, why am I showing you a picture of Edinburgh Castle now? Well, it's really just to tell you that this is the current home of the Stone of Destiny. The real thing, or the supposed real thing, is kept here at Edinburgh Castle, along with the Scottish Crown Jewels. So yeah, it is actually on display in Edinburgh Castle. You can go see it if you so wish, and a long time ago, when I was a little kid, I actually did get to go and see the real thing in its display in Edinburgh Castle. I haven't visited it for many years. It's been a long time since I've actually been up to the castle properly. If you ever go to Edinburgh, or ever come to Scotland, it is well worth a visit to go and see the castle. If you ever decide to, you can find the entrance on the Royal Mile. The Royal Mile is essentially like the high street of Edinburgh. It's got a lot of big names, big brand local shops, I should say. It's pretty culturally important in terms of Edinburgh. Really nice street just to go for a walk up and down. It is on a hill, I will warn you that. Some of you might wonder, why is it called the Royal Mile? Well, put simply, it connects Edinburgh Castle to Holyrood Palace, and right near where Holyrood Palace is the current Scottish Parliament building. Yeah, a lot of people will probably be cringing at the sound of the Scottish Parliament building, not because of the Scottish Parliament or anything like that, but just because the building itself is really ugly. It is such an ugly construction. Honestly, I don't know what the architects were thinking, but that's by the by. Moving swiftly on, the Royal Mile, it connects Holyrood Palace to Edinburgh Castle, and it's pretty much exactly 1 mile, hence what gives it its name. As I was saying, well worth a visit if you're ever in Edinburgh or in Scotland at all. Now, some of you may be wondering, did I get to see the stone return to Edinburgh? No, I didn't. I was only 2 years old at the time, and far too young to go out into the middle of the streets in a big crowded area to see the rock getting returned, so no, I didn't actually see the returning of the stone. Though I imagine it would have been a pretty momentous day, and would have been quite a day to actually witness, but no, I didn't get to see it. So yeah, ladies and gentlemen, I know I've been going on for a while now, but I've only really got one final thing to talk about. Hopefully you're all still with me. I really hope you're all still with me. And that's whether or not this stone is in fact the real deal. Is it the real stone? Is it a complete or a fake? And who knows? Well, let's hopefully explore that together. I mean, I do hope that you're still with me on this. So without further ado, let's continue to the final end. So, ladies and gentlemen, here is another image of King Edward I, and a lot of you might be wondering, why am I showing you this guy again? Okay, yeah, let all the jokes roll in, yeah, we know. People don't like him, moving swiftly on. And in all fairness to the English, you can't deny he was a very strong, very powerful king for England. I mean, the English may say he was a very good king, others may say he wasn't. Again, it's up for academic debate. Let's move on and away from whether or not you think he was a nice guy or not. So, moving swiftly on. Why am I showing you his image again? Well, put bluntly, I personally don't think that the stone he got hold of was real. I mean, what do you guys think? Do you really think the monks looking after the stone at the Scone Abbey would really want him to get their hands on it, or do you think any Scotsman would have wanted the English king that they supposedly hated to get their hands on their coronation stone, their stone of destiny? Yeah, I doubt it. I really, really doubt it. I know, press X to doubt that old meme again. So, again, personally, I think the stone that Edward took back to London with him was a fake. A lot of you might be going, whoa, hang on, Shenlong, you've got absolutely no evidence to support that. And, okay, yeah, I have no physical hard-end proof. But I will tell you this. The stones of destiny that was in London had a geological study conducted on it. What the geologists found, and unfortunately I don't know their names, if anybody does know who conducted the study, please leave it in the comments. But either way, the geological study showed that the sandstone that made up the Stone of Destiny was an exact match to the sandstone found in the area around Scone. Now, the geologists in the area, like me, will probably be able to identify, that's old red sandstone. And yeah, you'd be right. It's a block of old red sandstone from the Scone area. Now, this kind of, if you believe it is the real stone, this kind of blows the biblical story right out of the water, because obviously it could not have come from Syria if in fact it's an exact match to the stones found in Scotland. You just can't have, because the world hasn't changed that much in the last 1,000 years to think, geologically speaking, the same stones could be found in both areas. Well, no, not quite. Yes, the same type of stone, red sandstone, could be found in both areas, yes, but there's subtle differences that geologists can tell. So no, I can assure you it's not that the stone from London is definitely from Scotland. There's no denying it. There's nothing against that. It is that stone. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, moving swiftly on, that kind of blows the biblical story out of the water, and it's another reason as to why I don't really believe the biblical story. Is because the Stone of Destiny that we see today is definitely from Scotland. Again, as I said, I believe it's a fake, so maybe the original did come from Syria, and the one that Edward got hold of is a fake that's from Scotland, or maybe even he decided to have his soldiers get hold of a stone roughly the same sort of size and shape that you heard the stories of from Scone and have it there, or more likely, the one that he got hold of was a decoy left by the monks. And this then leaves the opinion of, well, what happened to the original one? Personally, I think it was either destroyed or it was hidden or disguised and hidden to keep Edward from getting his hands on it. And if that's the case, they probably hid it so well that it's just never been found again, or the only people that knew where it was died without telling anybody, and again, as a result, nobody knows where the real thing is. But what do you guys think? Am I wrong? Am I right? Well, there's another sort of reason as to why the stone may be fake, and we'll come to that right now. So, ladies and gentlemen, the second argument to suggest that the Stone of Destiny is in fact a fake is an event that took place in 1950. So, on Christmas Eve in 1950, a Scottish, I believe it was a law student called Ian Hamilton, and a group of friends decided one night that they wanted the stone back in Scotland. They didn't want it to be in England anymore. And so they went off and nicked it. Yeah, a bunch of Scottish law students actually went down to London on Christmas Eve and pinched this stone right out of the Abbey. However, the stone was supposedly returned to the authorities, and we see it actually here being returned at some point the following April. So exactly what happened to it during the intervening months, I honestly have absolutely no idea. No one other than the thieves probably actually know what happened. Now, I know that Ian Hamilton has done interviews and come out and told his story and whatnot. Exactly the details, I don't really know much about it. I've not really followed his story very much. So the idea behind it is that some people argue that after it was stolen, the stone that they returned to the authorities, for whatever reason, I don't know exactly why they decided to return it, again, I don't know, but supposedly the stone they returned is in fact a fake, and they hid the real one somewhere. Again, possibly. I mean, the fact that the stone is stolen, or was stolen, it definitely happened. There's lots of documented evidence to say that the stone was stolen, and the culprits have done interviews about it before. As to why they stole the stone, well, that's their own personal beliefs down to Scottish culture. They believe that the stone should have been returned to Scotland a long time ago, and they decided to do something about it. But as it turns out, they needn't have bothered, because our queen actually decided herself that she wanted the stone to be returned anyway, so it was really kind of a wasted effort on their part, especially since they actually gave the bloody thing back. So yeah, I personally find that quite amusing. They went to an abbey, pinched it, and then got cold feet and returned the thing. But again, if you were to argue, it is a valid potential evidence that you could see that they did in fact steal the real one, and they returned a fake from Scone. And what do you guys think? Do you think this story is the actual thing that happened? Do you think the ones that the thieves stole was real, or do you think they stole a fake and returned a fake, or do you think they stole the real one, returned a fake? Do you think they stole the real one, returned the real one? Or do you think they stole the original fake that King Edward took, and they returned that exact same fake? It's up to you guys what you believe, but all I can say is I personally think that the stone that Edward got his hands on was a fake, and the original is either destroyed or is disguised and still hidden somewhere in Scotland. That's my personal belief. Again though, that is just my own opinion. And again, I would love to hear what you guys thought. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is us coming towards the end of the video now. I know I've been going on for a while, nearly 45 minutes. Wow. You still with me? I really do hope that you're still with me. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, if you are still here with me watching to the end, I really do appreciate you sticking it out. I know it's been quite a long one this time. So, thank you very much. All views, comments, and whatnot, I greatly appreciate. The only other last thing here is, again, what's your opinion? What do you think? Do you think it's real? Do you think it's fake? Do you have some other opinion on it? Please, by all means, let us know in the comment section down below what you think. And again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for sticking out to the end with me. I really appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for listening. If you enjoyed this video, then please remember to like and subscribe for more lore, myths, legends, and stories. So that's us now at the end, ladies and gentlemen. I will bid you all a very fond farewell for now. As I said, the next video coming up will be the Monkey King, or at least the first part of the Monkey King. And yeah, I know I said I wasn't going to do it, but when I actually do that video, I'll go into the reasons as to why I changed my mind and decided to do the video after all. So please do look forward to that. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to sign off now, and wherever you are in the world, I hope that you're staying safe, that your families are safe and whatnot, especially with the ongoing situation, shall we say. So stay healthy, stay safe, stay strong. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Sharon Longpen Dragon, and until next time, knowledge is power.